shield protecting the parachutes. The command to open the chutes expected to come at around 8:44 p.m. Central Time tonight. At first, the two pilot parachutes, the second of which extracting the drogue chute, which does all of the initial slowing. Drogue chute then released and bringing out the main parachute to do all of the final slowing down to a descent rate of only 7.2 meters per second, also dispelling any excess heat. Finishing off with the soft landing jets just about 2 seconds before touchdown. All that coming up soon following that successful separation of modules. Vehicle expected to touch down in central Kazakhstan at the landing site. Reports going up to the crew, the weather quite nice right now, as we were expecting. Search and recovery forces already wheels up and in the area. We'll hope to get some video from the launch site as it comes down, or at the very least as the crew is being extracted from teams down on the ground. This again a look at all of the search and recovery vehicles making the trip. The two control command planes in the air supporting all of the ground operations. The Russian Mi-8 helicopters carrying the big bulk of support personnel out to the landing site, along with a small fleet of all-terrain vehicles bringing all extra logistical equipment. So again, all of those assets in place now at the landing site to the southeast of JAXA. All they need now is for the Soyuz to touchdown. That landing right now just about 22 minutes away. So at this point, the vehicle has begun entry interface and is continuing to descend through the Earth's atmosphere. The crew will experience the maximum G-force loads, typically about 4 to 5 Gs, once they hit an altitude of 20.8 miles. That coming up on just about 5 minutes or so. The next major thing we'll be looking out for is the command to open the parachutes, which will come at 8:44 p.m. Central Time tonight. And so again, the Soyuz craft carrying the trio right now entering through the Earth's atmosphere, experiencing the heat up of re-entry with the heat shield protecting the crew inside of the descent module. Due to the plasma of re-entry and the distance from the station at this point, communication with the vehicle in a bit of a blackout period, so should hopefully reestablish voice communication with the crew either in the next few minutes or once they reacquire communication with one of the patrolling aircraft in the area. Again, the next major milestone we'll be listening for will be the confirmation that the command to open the parachutes has been given. The chutes being commanded to open while the vehicle's at an altitude of a little over 35,000 feet. Under 19 minutes now from scheduled touchdown in Kazakhstan. So again, just a few minutes away now from that command to open the parachutes. In just about 30 seconds or so, the crew will be experiencing the maximum G-force loads of their re-entry, pulling about 4 to 5 Gs. And at that point, they'll be at an altitude of about 109,000 feet. Command to open the parachutes should come at 8:44 p.m. Central Time. The 2 pilot parachutes deploying, the second bringing out the drogue chute. The drogue chute then deploying the main chute to slow the vehicle down to a descent rate of only 7.2 meters per second. Again, all of the milestones being checked off without issues so far today, continuing to march forward towards that parachute opening. And the touchdown in Kazakhstan just about 15 or 16 minutes away from now.
We have you. We're at 3 now. Integral is +8. Mastracchio, what's your miss? Plus. 1.8 G load. Integral is +8. Copy.
Seconds before
Standby.
till inaudible.
Copy.
Expecting the command to open the parachutes in about 30 seconds or so. So the monitors in Koryov indicating parachute deploy will continue to stand by for confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer here in Houston. And at this point, just 12 minutes away now from touchdown. And at this point, the Soyuz should be under the command or the control of the parachutes, beginning its final slowdown. And so at this point, coming up in 11 minutes from landing, the Soyuz is descending under the parachutes right now. The drogue chute doing the initial slowing from a descent rate of 230 meters per second down to 80 meters per second. Once the drogue chute does its job, it'll release the main parachute, which will slow the Soyuz down to a much more manageable 7.2 meters per second, also angling the Soyuz to expel any excess heat that built up from re-entry before shifting back down to a straight vertical descent. And then the final stage of landing, those soft landing engines firing just 2 seconds before touchdown while the vehicle's just under a meter above the ground to provide a little bit of extra cushioning for their touchdown. And here are our first views from the search and recovery forces of the Soyuz craft, as you can see, under parachute power. Under 10 minutes now from touchdown. This is again a live view of that Soyuz vehicle in its final stage of descent. So again, this is a live view of the Soyuz while it continues to descend. Just about 8.5 minutes now from touchdown. We'll continue to get live views from the landing site as the search and recovery forces move in following the touchdown of the Soyuz craft to extract the crew. So continuing to get a live view of the Soyuz TMA 11M spacecraft under its final descent. The main parachute working to slow the craft to a descent rate of only 7.2 meters per second. Search and recovery forces not only having visual confirmation but also confirming that they are in audio contact with the crew. Just under 6 minutes now from touchdown. Now just around 5 minutes from landing. Visiting vehicle officer here in Houston relaying the search and recovery forces, telling us that the vehicle is at about 2,300 meters and still descending. Should be around 3.5 minutes until touchdown. In the background you can see one of the Russian Mi-8 military helicopters arriving on scene with search and recovery forces. The search and recovery forces will converge on the capsule once it's touched down and begin the extraction of the crew immediately. If the capsule lands upright, they'll first have to extract a stand to place over the vehicle. Often, though, the vehicle will land on its side and roll over, in which they'll just open the hatch and extract the crew with it lying down. Should now just be around 2 minutes from touchdown in Kazakhstan. Getting a view of the Kazakh desert where the capsule is expected to touch down. Should hopefully get a pretty good view of the soft landing jets right as they fire when the vehicle is just under a meter above the ground. Again, those soft landing jets will fire once it's about 0.8 meters above the ground, slowing the vehicle to its final descent rate of 1.5 meters per second. Coming up on around 1 minute until touchdown.
Касания не видно, но volume горизонта уже все. Касания не видно, но volume горизонта уже все. По-моему, касания есть. По-моему, касания есть. Да, все, касания есть. Почему видно? Почему видно?
And there we have confirmation of landing, the traditional Yes Pasatka appearing at the Russian Mission Control Center. Meanwhile, the camera crew tries to work through a few technical difficulties. And we'll stand by for an official landing time. But again, the capsule at this point on the ground. So again, at this point, the Soyuz has touched down. We'll hopefully be getting some better views of the capsule as the search and recovery forces converge on the vehicle. And so just now getting confirmation from the search and recovery forces that the vehicle touched down at 8:58 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time tonight. Vehicle landing upright according to the search and recovery forces, the crew reporting that they are doing well and in good health. So at this point, the search and recovery forces will move in, begin the extraction of the crew. As mentioned, at first they'll have to construct a stand if it is still upright. to begin removing the crew from the Soyuz capsule. We'll carry them into specially lined seats just next to it for the crew to relax before being moved into the medical tent, where they will get their first medical checkouts following landing. And they'll be loaded into helicopters and then sent on their way to the airport to then come back to their home bases. Koichi Wakata and Rick Mastracchio on tap to come back here to the Johnson Space Center, while Mikhail Tyurin will be headed back to the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia. But again, confirmation from the search and recovery forces, the Soyuz capsule has touched down. That landing coming at 8:58 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time tonight in the central portion of Kazakhstan, just to the southeast of JAXA.
Station Moscow, space to ground 1, become reconfig. Station Moscow, space to ground 1.
Конфигурация связи.
For come reconfig. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Moscow.
Alexander,
Alexander,
сообщить, что
we would like to inform you that Soyuz TMA 11M has been a success. It's been nominal. It landed at the nominal expected time, so we are go to perform the post-landing com reconfig. You are going to do that. And also, when you're done, please deactivate the input panel, and then we're standing by for your call when you're done, if it's not too much trouble. Not too much trouble. Everything will be performed, completed, and reported. Copy. Standing by for that.
And again, at this point, the search and recovery forces converging on the craft. In the next couple of minutes, we should hopefully begin getting views again from the landing site once they're set up and ready to begin extracting the crew from the Soyuz craft. Just to recap, this wraps up 188 days in space for the trio, Koichi Wakata, Mikhail Tyurin, and Rick Mastracchio. In those 188 days, they completed 3,008 orbits of the Earth, traveling over 79.7 statute miles. Mastracchio, he now sits with 228 days in space, spread across 4 space flights. Koichi Wakata, the first Japanese commander of the International Space Station, now has a total cumulative count of 348 days in space, also spread across 4 space flights. Mikhail Tyurin, the most veteran in the group, now racking up 532 days in space on only 3 flights. He is now 13th on the all-time endurance list for time spent in space. In the center screen of the Russian Mission Control Center, you can see written "Yes, Posadka," literally translated to English, "There is a landing," but a little more colloquially means "we have a landing." Is the traditional screen that goes up following touchdown. Again, that landing coming at 8:58 p.m. Central Time. so continuing to stand by while the search and recovery forces convene or converge on the Soyuz craft. They're made up of a mix of flight doctors and vehicle technicians, as well as representatives from NASA, Roscosmos, and JAXA. They'll be responsible for safing the vehicle first and foremost, and then pulling the crew out before getting them some quick medical checkouts and sending them on their way. There in the center screen in Mission Control Moscow, you can see the crews erecting the stand around the Soyuz craft. Should hopefully be getting that video feed shortly. But the search and recovery forces on site with the vehicle. With the stand erected, they'll begin extracting the crew from the Soyuz vehicle, which touched down successfully at 8:58 p.m. Central. And here we are now getting live views from the landing site. Again, the stand erected around the vehicle. The search and recovery forces ready to shortly begin the extraction of the 3 crew members from the Soyuz craft.
My passport? We'll say congratulations.
Here they are. Are you getting ready?
No. They're feeling well.
We're feeling fine.
Those have to be immediate. Those have to be.
Are you ready?
Миша, внимание! Закрыть забрало! Открываем люк!
Misha, attention, we're opening the hatch.
Открыли люк. Да. Юрий Валентин.
Yuri Valentinovich, good afternoon.
Аккуратно, аккуратно.
Be careful, be careful.
Федор, привет!
Fyodor, hello.
С прибытием!
Welcome back.
Рядовую, давай! Сережа!
Поэтому вот по этому телефону мы попросим, он даст ему поговорить. Хорошо? Ну вот сейчас, по которому ты говорил. Тогда сейчас...
Там стол же прям
Are you guys getting video from the landing site? Okay. All 10 kilos are here now. Well, pretty much checked in by Kazakhstan on the ground. So as you can see, they got the hatch open. Says they're doing great. Hey, Greg, Rob Navy.
Again, at this point, the hatch to the vehicle is open. The search and recovery forces about to begin the extraction of the crew from the capsule.
Okay. Yes.
It's just around 8:17 in the morning right now in Kazakhstan.
Так, ну давайте по времени эвакуацию, давай теперь прямой. Хорошо, я по здоровью говорю.
do you have Romanov's kit nearby? Yes, I think Romanov can take it.
Для американцев не решал, какой решал, нашего человека немного возить вместе с мамой. И все. Мы же давно об этом говорили. Кому? Весь вопрос, кому говорить-то? Я так это делаю. Кто это? Так, ладно, давай тогда эвакуация приступает. Так.
Okay, let's start taking them out. How are you doing? Vadim, do you need help? Hold on a second. Do I need to unstrap completely? No? Do you need straps? Misha? Vadim will figure it out. Hold on.
One mosquito.
Георгиевич, там где у нас это? Вот здесь.
Did you free up the legs? Hold on. Stop. Sit down. Okay. Let's stand up. I got you. All done. Be careful with the legs. Okay, let's sit him down. Okay, I'm holding him. Let him sit down for a little bit.
And right now we see Russian cosmonaut Mikhail Tyurin, the first one, being lifted out of the capsule.
Misha, there is no rush.
Each of the astronauts experiencing gravity for the first time in over 6 months.
Start swinging his legs up.
So a few physical effects per the norm.
Be careful. Sit down. Stay like that. Okay, let's go for a ride. Okay, hold him, hold him. Should we close?
So again, each of the crew members removed one by one and moved just a little bit away from the capsule into a waiting chair until all three are out successfully.
Lift his leg. Lift his legs. Did anyone drop this? Welcome back.
Не надо, пожалуйста. Это вообще лучше не трогать.
No, just... I think we're fine. Just don't touch anything. Do you need sunglasses, Misha? No, I'm fine. I would like to get the first readings. Hold on, hold on. Hold on a second, there is no hurry. Everything is good? What's the pressure? The descent module is in the vertical position. The crew members are being taken out, evacuated out of the descent module. Oleg Nikolaevich, hello. Heart rate is 100.
Again, the first crew member out, Russian cosmonaut Mikhail Tyurin, being seen to by flight surgeons. They'll take a couple of initial medical readings, both here and usually inside of a medical tent constructed just a short ways away. Tyurin, again, the most veteran space flyer among the group, returning today with 532 days total spent in space now.
No, everything is...
Generally, each of the crew members getting a chance to speak with loved ones right upon arrival.
The landing was just wonderful. Everything was perfect. All the equipment and hardware worked.
So again, Tyurin, the first one out of the capsule so far. The Soyuz landing upright. The teams having the craft in place and the extraction stand around it. Tyurin was the commander of the 37 Soyuz vehicle, the Soyuz TMA 11M, during all of its descent and re-entry operations today. Still inside, NASA astronaut Rick Mastracchio and Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata waiting their turn. Representatives from each space agency on site at the landing zone.
Would you like some tea with lemon? Water? But why are you taking it all off? The previous time you took it all away.
And now we see Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata, the second to be extracted from the Soyuz capsule. Wakata was the commander of the International Space Station over the last couple of months. He was the first Japanese commander of the international complex. Wakata now a total cumulative spaceflight time of 348 days in space, spread across 4 flights. He's also a veteran of 2 shuttle missions and then 1 expedition, or a range of expeditions a few years ago, being a flight engineer on expeditions 18 through 20. This all is part of 1 increment. Wakata now being carried over to his seat alongside Tyurin.
Thank you, you're welcome.
And again, 2 of the 3 space flyers now out of the Soyuz craft. Here you can see Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata now out of the capsule in his seat, going through the same initial medical checkouts that Tyurin just went through. And each of these crew members typically undergoes immediately upon recovery from the Soyuz. With these 2 out, next up will be NASA astronaut Rick Mastracchio, who is the board engineer inside the left seat of the Soyuz craft for all of the night's events.
Могу сказать, что все прошло. Как студентов учат. Потом чик-чик-чик-чик-чик. Потом просто так не бывает. А может и бывает, так и должно быть. Вот. То есть просто идеально как учили. При открытии парашюта сильно вращал? Нет. Так как и должно вращать с прецессией, с угловой скоростью. Нормальная динамика прецессия, поскольку косое обтекание, так и должно быть. Вот. Еще что порадовало, хотя бы...
So again, 2 of the 3 already out of the capsule, standing by for views of NASA astronaut Rick Mastracchio, who will be the 3rd and final crew member to be extracted from this Soyuz vehicle, which landed successfully in Kazakhstan at 8:58 p.m. Central Time. All of tonight's events going off without a hitch. The 3 returning after 188 days spent in space and on board the International Space Station.
Миша, что бы тебе сейчас
Misha,
закусить?
what would you like to eat right now as a snack? Well, some red wine. Well, we'll skip the red wine. I'm not saying you have to provide it right now. You said, well, would like to, that would be something I would like to. Do we have tea? Would you like some tea? Maybe some water? Briefly, what do you think the result of the increment is? Did you manage to achieve all the tasks? I think we could have backed in more.
Here now cutting back to a view on top of the Soyuz vehicle as search and recovery forces working to extract the 3rd and final crew member, Rick Mastracchio, the NASA astronaut amongst the group. Meanwhile, Mikhail Tyurin and Koichi Wakata already out and seated, being attended to by flight surgeons and other search and recovery forces personnel. And there's our first view of NASA astronaut Rick Mastracchio again being removed from the Soyuz craft now, the 3rd and final crew member coming down this evening or morning if you're over in Kazakhstan. He'll be handed down by the search and recovery forces here and moved over to join his fellow Expedition 39 crew members. But again, with that, all 3 crew members now removed from the Soyuz vehicle. Why don't we go ahead and get a quick update now? NASA Public Affairs Officer Rob Navius is standing by at the landing zone. Rob, real quick, why don't you give us your first impressions? How does everything seem to be going out there?
Good to talk to you, Dan. We're about 5 feet away from the Soyuz TMA 11M spacecraft. All 3 crew members now in their reclining chairs after a very swift recovery. In stark contrast to what we saw 2 months ago, just 2 months ago, where the Expedition 38 crew was greeted in an ice storm, 0 degrees Fahrenheit, snow up to everybody's knees. It is a superb, scintillating morning here about 90 miles southeast of Kazakh. Temperatures near 70 degrees, a cloudless sky to greet the Expedition 39 crew. This trio began their 188-day mission back on November 7th, carrying the Olympic torch to the International Space Station. Today, 6 months later, they ended their flight with an Olympic gold performance, sticking the landing upright of their Soyuz spacecraft to wrap up their 6 months in space. The inflatable orange medical tent is nearby, just about 40 yards away. After a few minutes here in their chairs, the crew will be taken sequentially into that medical tent, will doff their Sokol launch and entry suits, and begin what is called a series of pilot field tests, very critical data collection opportunities to see in the initial moments after a landing how a returning crew from a long-duration flight reacts back in a gravity environment. This will involve a series of squats. The crew will bend over. This will apply to Mastracchio and Wakata. In this particular case, the first data set to be offered in the medical tent, in which they will conduct these tests, data collection not only here, but back at the airport in Prestwick, Scotland, after Mastracchio and Wakata stop for a refueling opportunity for the NASA plane that will take them back to Houston. The landing couldn't have been more perfect. It was a bullseye landing. The first of the search and recovery helicopters were on the deck about 4 minutes after the touchdown of the Soyuz vehicle. The medical tent was quickly erected, and as you mentioned a few minutes ago, Mikhail Tyurin, the Soyuz commander, was extracted from the top hatch of the Soyuz vehicle just minutes after that. The atmosphere here is frankly jubilant. This search and recovery team, Rosaviatsa, the civilian search and recovery forces, they have this down to a fine science right now, and have made very swift work in recovering the crew. I might also mention that now that the crew members are out of the Soyuz vehicle, some of the critical cargo will begin to be removed from the Soyuz, critical items that were brought back to Earth to be analyzed by the spacecraft specialists, and some of those items to be returned to NASA for post-flight evaluation. Items that were squirreled away in the Soyuz vehicle could be brought back to Earth for early return, the early cargo return back to Houston. Back to you, Dan.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rob, for that quick update. Like you said, the weather cooperating a lot more this time, so good to see that you guys aren't, knee-deep in snow. Best of luck on your return, and we'll see you back here in Houston very shortly.
All right, Dan, thanks very much.
So with that, now getting a smile from Rick Mastracchio, the third and final crew member to be removed from the Soyuz craft following the three's successful touchdown at 8:58 p.m. Central Time this evening. The time just 7:58 in the morning in Kazakhstan at the time of touchdown. As you just heard, the crew will next move on to some medical checkouts in the medical tent erected not too far away from the landing zone. Part of this just routine medical checkouts, but also important data gathering for the multitude of experiments that these astronauts are subjected to themselves during their long-duration space flights, each acting as test subjects for a number of human health and performance research activities while they spend up to 6 months in space. Many of these designed to focus on countermanding a lot of the negative effects that weightlessness can have on the human body when we are exposed to it for long durations of time. A lot of those studies also, though, having direct impacts to people here on the Earth, as many debilitating diseases will present the same symptoms that our bodies present when exposed to microgravity. Things like bone loss and muscle dense and muscle atrophy found in many degenerative diseases. So a lot of these data takes will be very important, not only for the ongoing research of protecting humans during long-duration space flight, but also for influencing a lot of medical procedures down here on the ground. But for now, all three crew members, again, in a jovial mood outside of their Soyuz spacecraft now, touching down after a flawless re-entry and landing. Rick Mastracchio, the NASA astronaut, on the right there. In the center, Russian cosmonaut Mikhail Tyurin. All the way on the left, Koichi Wakata of the Japanese Space Agency, the first Japanese commander of the International Space Station. All three wrapping up 188 days in space with this landing this evening. So again, next up, the crew fairly shortly will begin to move over to the medical tents. Following all of that testing, the helicopters will then transport the crew back to the airfield at Karaganda, at which point the crew will split up and head back to their respective home bases. Mikhail Tyurin headed to the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia. Rick Mastracchio and Koichi Wakata headed back here to Houston aboard the NASA 992 jet. And coming back here to the Johnson Space Center. Mikhail Tyurin at this point being carried away first towards that medical tent. Next up will be Koichi Wakata, and then following immediately behind him, NASA astronaut Rick Mastracchio.
You got it? Okay, let's move.
No, but they just, when we were standing there for the picture, they started to see them offline.
So they're already carrying them? I think we need to take the bags.
Here you can see each of the crew members being carried into that orange inflatable medical tent, set up just a few feet away from the landing zone.
Do you take enough photographs?
Так, что, помогать? Шну.
Смотреть вообще, как стык нашел. Сейчас можно с тобой фотографию? Флаги попадают. Сейчас не видно. Они туда принесли, сейчас будут там сейчас корреспонденты. Да. А мы летим. Вот. Прямой эфир.
Here, wave, you're live.
Так, Понёжу палатку, вон стоит, справа от палатки.
Все, ага. Все, понял. Пожалуйста, давай. Как? Нормально. Вопрос опять. Я расстроен. Со съемкой корректировки. Ну потому что ладно, ну что ты. Ну, блин. Борисович не верит, что можно со всем справляться. Ну да, на кому не опираться. Я привет, молодец, Леша, отлично. Надо, чтобы один человек. Дайте взлетел. А что там? Да. Я этого ну, что, делали работу?
Ну, короче, там, оказывается, рэп ставится, вот эта коробочка скрывается, и там рэп.
So with the crew now inside of the medical tent, the search and recovery forces will continue to safe the vehicle here in central Kazakhstan. Again, everything going exactly as planned, a flawless landing, touching down at 8:58 p.m. Central Time. We'll stick with the landing video for a little while. We might be able to secure a replay of the landing shot from one of the Mi-8 helicopters that was circling. So we'll stand by for a few minutes to see if we can bring that to you. But again, just to recap, flawless landing this evening, 8:58 p.m. Central Time, as the crew of Koichi Wakata, Mikhail Tyurin, and Rick Mastracchio touched down in Kazakhstan, just to the southeast of JAXA, wrapping up 188 days in space and on board the International Space Station.
А источник какой там? Источник какой? В левом нижнем углу.
Here we are now getting just that replay. This shot from one of the Russian Mi-8 helicopters that was circling the landing site as the capsule was performing its final descent under parachute. Again, this video shot from earlier this evening from the air of one of the helicopters in the racetrack formation around the Soyuz landing zone as the capsule was completing its final descent. At this point, it was under that main parachute, which was responsible for slowing the capsule down to a descent rate of just 7.2 meters per second. Again, continuing to watch this replay of the Soyuz TMA 11M spacecraft while it was in its final stage of descent under its main parachute. Continued to watch as just about 2 seconds before landing should hopefully see those soft landing engines fire while the craft is just a little under a meter above the ground. And right now we're continuing to replay this view from one of the Mi-8 helicopters that was circling the landing zone as the Soyuz was in the final stage of descent under the main parachute. Soyuz spends about 14 minutes under the slowing power of parachutes. The command coming to deploy the first chutes came this evening at around 8:44 p.m. Central. The actual touchdown coming 14 minutes later at 8:58 p.m. Central. And just there you saw the soft landing engines fire. Again, the vehicle about a meter over the ground. When those go off, slowing the vehicle down to 1.5 meters per second. That touchdown occurred at 8:58 p.m. Central Time this evening. And as Public Affairs Officer Rob Navius reported from the field out there in Kazakhstan, a pinpoint landing, vehicle landing upright, not tipping over, and landing just on time as the search and recovery forces circled around. In the background there you can see all-terrain vehicles converging on the landing zone. Now getting a few more final views of the landing site taken from one of the Russian military helicopters circling the landing zone, responsible for delivering search and recovery forces rapidly to the zone to begin extraction of the crew. This now some videos. The first teams who are arriving on site at the Soyuz landing. See one of the all-terrain vehicles arriving. Numerous Mi-8 helicopters already on the ground with personnel.
Пока не включай, сейчас я штатив поставлю.
Do not turn it on yet. I'm going to set up the tripod.
Штатив поставлю сейчас, пока не включай.
Do not turn it on yet. Let me set up the tripod. Move away, please. Back away a little.
У меня-то есть картинка. Это Леша, Сереж.
Am I giving you a video? Understand?
Ты со мной. Я тебя рядом прикрываю, идет ветка, чего ты это.
Понял, понял.
I'm nearby.
Хорошо.
So if you need anything, let me know.
Ну, мне вот единственное стоит...
Я понимаю, понимаю.
I understand, yes.
Никто не знает, и как бы.
Ну, я понял, да.
It's just they don't know you yet.
Вадим. А ты не слышал, что? Может, Степаныч просто говорит.
А, ну Степаныч сейчас... Теперь понял.
Did you hear? Stepanich is not here. Okay, I got it.
Потом, сейчас не будем. Потом. Младше будет так вот. Вот так вот, да. Как? Вот. И тут на телефоне добьешь объект. Вот так? Сюда надо вот. Давай сюда. А во-первых, и снимать они будут, да? Ты слышишь?
Понял.
I understand.
Да? С той стороны. Ага.
Не, мы здесь постоим. Это, слышишь? У нас вот с той стороны не приходит.
Лучше с той стороны, Степаныч, лучше с той стороны. Там потом...
It would be better to go over there on that side.
Вот так отлично. Если мы...
Yes, that's great. Yes, I see it.
Давайте туда чуть-чуть перейду.
Let me move over there.
So again, these are just a couple of replays from right after the Soyuz capsule was on the ground and the search and recovery forces were moving in to safe the vehicle. But with that, we will go ahead and move towards the end of tonight's coverage. Again, the successful landing of 3 crew members from the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Rick Mastracchio, Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata, and Russian cosmonaut Mikhail Tyurin, returning to the Earth after spending 188 days in space. Koichi Wakata was the first Japanese commander of the International Space Station. Mastracchio now has 228 days in space on 4 space flights, and Tyurin 532 days and 13th on the all-time endurance list, wrapping up a very successful expedition which saw Mastracchio do 3 spacewalks, and then the entire crew tackle a number of important science and research experiments on board, as well as welcoming quite a few visiting vehicles, including commercial resupply craft from both the SpaceX Dragon craft coming up recently, and also Orbital Sciences completing its first flight, its first cargo resupply flight to the International Space Station while these 3 were on board. A couple of quick programming notes for you as we wrap up. We'll be having the video file showing the highlights of all of tonight's landing activities coming up at midnight Central Time, 1 a.m. Eastern Time. So be sure to stay tuned for that coming up in about 2 hours or so. And as always, you can tune in to Space Station Live in the morning at 10 a.m. Central for another look at all of tonight's landing activities, as well as look at life on board the International Space Station. Space Station Live again, 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Eastern. So with that, thanks for tuning in and watching this successful landing today. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. This is Mission Control Houston. And at this point, just 12 minutes away now from touchdown. And at this point, the Soyuz should be under the command or the control of the parachutes, beginning its final slowdown. And so at this point, coming up in 11 minutes from landing, the Soyuz is descending under the parachutes right now. The drogue chute doing the initial slowing from a descent rate of 230 meters per second down to 80 meters per second. Once the drogue chute does its job, it'll release the main parachute, which will slow the Soyuz down to a much more manageable 7.2 meters per second, also angling the Soyuz to expel any excess heat that built up from re-entry before shifting back down to a straight vertical descent. And then the final stage of landing, those soft landing engines firing just 2 seconds before touchdown while the vehicle's just under a meter above the ground to provide a little bit of extra cushioning for their touchdown. And here. So again, just a few minutes away now from that command to open the parachutes. In just about 30 seconds or so, the crew will be experiencing the maximum G-force loads of their re-entry, pulling about 4 to 5 Gs. And at that point, they'll be at an altitude of about 109,000 feet. Command to open the parachutes should come at 8:44 p.m. Central Time. The 2 pilot parachutes deploying, the second bringing out the drogue chute. The drogue chute then deploying the main chute to slow the vehicle down to a descent rate of only 7.2 meters per second. Again, all of the milestones being checked off without issues so far today, continuing to march forward towards that parachute opening and the touchdown in Kazakhstan just about 15 or 16 minutes away from now.
We're at 3 now. Integral is +8. Mastracchio, what's your miss? Plus. $1.8 G load. Integral is +8. Copy.
$50 seconds before.
Stand by.
Till inaudible.
Copy.
Expecting the command to open the parachutes in about 30 seconds or so. So the monitors in Koryov indicating parachute deploy will continue to stand by for confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer here in Houston. Protecting the parachutes. The command to open the chutes expected to come at around 8:44 p.m. Central Time tonight. First, the 2 pilot parachutes, the second of which extracting the drogue chute, which does all of the initial slowing. Drogue chute then released and bringing out the main parachute to do all of the final slowing down to a descent rate of only 7.2 meters per second, also dispelling any excess heat. Finishing off with the soft landing jets just about 2 seconds before touchdown. All that coming up soon following that successful separation of modules. Vehicle expected to touch down in central Kazakhstan at the landing site. Reports going up to the crew, the weather quite nice right now as we were expecting. Search and recovery forces already wheels up and in the area. We'll hope to get some video from the launch site as it comes down, or at the very least as the crew is being extracted from teams down on the ground. This again a look at all the search and recovery vehicles making the trip. The two control command planes in the air supporting all of the ground operations. The Russian Mi-8 helicopters carrying the big bulk of support personnel out to the landing site, along with a small fleet of all-terrain vehicles bringing all extra logistical equipment. So again, all of those assets in place now at the landing site to the southeast of JAXA. All they need now is for the Soyuz to touch down. That landing right now just about 22 minutes away. So at this point, the vehicle has begun entry interface and is continuing to descend through the Earth's atmosphere. The crew will experience the maximum G-force loads, typically about 4 to 5 Gs, once they hit an altitude of 20.8 miles. That coming up on just about 5 minutes or so. The next major thing we'll be looking out for is the command to open the parachutes, which will come at 8:44 p.m. Central Time tonight. And so again, the Soyuz craft carrying the trio right now entering through the Earth's atmosphere, experiencing the heat up of re-entry with the heat shield protecting the crew inside of the descent module. Due to the plasma of re-entry and the distance from the station at this point, communication with the vehicle in a bit of a blackout period, so should hopefully reestablish voice communication with the crew either in the next few minutes or once they reacquire communication with one of the patrolling aircraft in the area. Again, the next major milestone we'll be listening for will be the confirmation that the command to open the parachutes has been given. The chutes being commanded to open while the vehicle's at an altitude of a little over 35,000 feet. Under 19 minutes now from scheduled touchdown in Kazakhstan.